What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Overwatch video. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down 7 pro concepts that you absolutely need to learn before you can climb to Grandmaster. And if you don't learn these, they're going to really come back to bite you later on, so make sure you watch the entire video. Then we're on to the first topic that we got to talk about, and this is one that everyone gets wrong all over the place. People don't really understand what these concepts mean, so let's break them down because they're incredibly important. And the topics that we're going to talk about is skill ceiling versus skill floor. So basically, a skill floor would be the minimum amount of skill required to have a decent amount of effectiveness on a hero. Now, the opposite of that would be a skill ceiling, which is the maximum possible amount of skill you could have on a hero, which could hypothetically be infinite. Some characters are going to have an extremely high or maybe even infinite skill ceiling, but everyone has a finite skill floor. But here's the thing that you need to understand. Some characters have high skill ceilings, some characters have high skill floors, and some have mix and matches of low and high of both. Let me give you an example so that you understand. So, for example, a character like Brig, right? She has a very low skill floor, which means it is really easy for you to pick her up and get reasonable amount of value just by existing. Everyone always made the meme, all you have to do is exist on Brig, but that realistically is all you had to do to get a certain amount of value, a pretty decent amount of value, so that she had a pretty low skill floor. Now, honestly, her peak wasn't that high either, and that doesn't mean that you couldn't like just carry really hard on Brig, but a lot of that had to do with game sense. It had a lot less to do with Brig individually, and as such, her skill ceiling was pretty low relative to most of the cast in the game. Now, let me give an example of the exact opposite, a high skill ceiling, high skill floor, someone like Widowmaker, extremely high skill floor, and this is why a lot of times if you have a Widowmaker in your game and you're lower than the diamond rank, they just suck, right? Unless they're a smurf, they absolutely suck. And the reason is, Widow has a very high skill floor, which means there's so much mechanical skill you need to put into that character before you could even get a decent amount of value. Now, to offset that though, Widowmaker has one of the highest skill ceilings in the game, potentially, because it's just about how many heads you can click, positioning and things like that matter to some extent, and that's why in my opinion she's not the highest skill ceiling, but it is extremely high up there. Now, let me talk about a character that has a low skill floor, but a high skill ceiling. Let's take a character like Doomfist. Very low skill floor, very easy for you to get value on him in the lower ranks. All you have to do is go in, you can get value, you can brawl, you can get people by surprise. It is really easy to do all that stuff, but the skill ceiling on Doomfist is immense. I mean, there's all these rollouts, all these bounces, there's so many different complex matchups, and different things that you could understand about getting the perfect amount of shield to win a matchup or a duel, whatever. There's so much. So he has a really low skill ceiling and a high skill floor. And why does all this matter? Well, typically, if you're at the lower ranks of Overwatch, you are going to hurt yourself if you're trying to consistently play a character that takes a high skill floor. And in my personal opinion, some characters are much better for you if you're trying to improve in Overwatch. A character like Doom, for instance, that has a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling is someone that you could improve with, get value at the lower ranks, and as you climb, you can learn and become better and learn more things on that hero. But a character like Widow, if you're picking him up in the lower rank, it's going to be like a cliff, right? Where you're going to work and work and work, and you're just going to be bad and horrible and horrible and horrible, and it's going to be frustrating, right? It's going to be so hard, but once you finally reach a plateau, all of a sudden you're going to be clicking all these heads, because you need to get to that plateau before you do almost anything on the hero. And that is the problem with some of these characters. So this is a really important concept that you should understand. Apply it to characters across the entire game, and that's pretty much the entirety of this important concept. Now, the next pro concept that we need to talk about, and this is one that people are still getting wrong, and it's so important to do, and it's simple as pushing past the cart for Snowball. Every single time you capture a payload, you should not be having 3 people on cart. I know that it pushes the cart faster. I know that you're hypothetically going to get there faster, but you're realistically not going to get there faster. What's going to happen is you're going to push that cart towards the end. The enemy's going to regroup as 6 people. They're going to come at you with all their ultimates, because you probably used your ultimates to win that first fight, and you're going to lose. And then all of a sudden, you have to win a fight at the end of second point when the spawn advantage is about even, and it's just so hard for you to win that one. So what you should be doing instead is after you win a team fight, you realistically should be keeping 1 person on cart, and the rest of you are pushing up as 5 people and putting pressure. You could get kills on all the people that are staggering behind, but you could realistically push out as far as you need to potentially kill and stagger as many enemies and put pressure on them while they're transversing the distances back to the team. And if the enemies are pushing too far up, they're going to get punished and die, and it's going to snowball, snowball, snowball. And typically as a defender, if you realize that the enemy are pushing up like this, you need to come out of spawn and retreat. You need to get the freak back, go back to your team, make sure that you aren't one of those ones that get staggered. This is a really important concept at pretty much any Masters Plus level game, and it's going to be something that you need to fundamentally understand if you want to improve at Overwatch. It is so important. And a lot of people ask the question, who's the character that you leave behind on cart? Well, it kind of depends. Typically, you want the person left on cart that is not really needed for the immediate fight, and typically you're going to leave your lesser healer on cart. Someone like a Zen or even a Lucio you would leave on cart, and you would have your other character push up. But it really depends on also who has ults and different things like that. So just keep in mind, whoever is going to contribute the least to the fight, who is the least necessary, you usually want to put them on the cart if you can help it. Now, the next concept we got to talk about is hard counter versus soft counter. And this is going to frustrate the crap out of you if you're playing like, Pharah, right? And the enemy swaps to Soldier, and someone's like, swap off, you're getting countered. And you're not getting countered. You know you're not getting countered. You know why? Because Soldier is not a hard counter to Pharah. It's a soft counter. Soft counters are all over the place. Basically, what a soft counter does is they have the tools to counteract your predominant playstyle. They have some tools, right? They have some tools to challenge your predominant playstyle. Just like a Pharah, a Doomfist doesn't have tools to challenge that far when she's flying up in the air, her predominant playstyle. But a Soldier does. He has a hit scan weapon. Now you might be asking, okay, then what is a hard counter? What is a hard counter to a Pharah? Well, a hard counter would be someone that completely makes it impossible to play your predominantly powerful strategy. If you're up against a Widowmaker as Pharah, you cannot play your predominant strategy. Sure, there are ways to play around it, but you cannot play your predominantly most powerful strategy, which is playing up really high, playing out in the open, going for picks, and playing above a lot of the effective damage in the game. Now, that doesn't mean you can't play Pharah, it just makes it a lot harder to play Pharah, and even if you're playing Pharah correctly, you might be getting a lot less value. Now, this is important to understand because maybe you might have to think about, hey, maybe I should swap off against my hard counter, but against soft counters, there are soft counters all over the place. And soft counters, it is incredibly possible for you to actually outplay these characters as long as you learn the matchup. Just like how Hanzo is technically a soft counter to Tracer, that doesn't mean that Tracers can't body Hanzos over and over again. If they come at him by surprise, they get some damage ahead of time, they use proper blink management to dodge every single one of his arrows while doing damage at the same time, she can just destroy Hanzo. It doesn't mean that you have to swap, and this is something that you need to get out of your head. Like, a hard counter is something like playing Wrecking Ball into a Sombra. A hard counter is not playing a Wrecking Ball into a McCree. That's a soft counter. This is a really important concept to grasp, and if you understand this concept, not only are you going to improve your game sense, but you're going to be able to either, one, find ways to outplay your soft counters, or two, understand characters that you can swap to that maybe even counter your predominant main's hard counter. For example, maybe as Pharah, you learn how to play against all your soft counters. You know how to play against the McCrees of the world, the Soldiers of the world, but the hard counter and Widowmaker, you want to pick up as your secondary character a character that soft counters Widowmaker in Hanzo. And now you're playing two characters that are projectile, but Hanzo has the tools to counter your hard counter, which is something that is extremely important. You have more tools in that matchup, so if you know both these characters, and you know how to play Pharah against every counter or every character besides Widow, and you can flex to Hanzo, you have a really good hero pool in only two characters, and this can expand to every single character or a couple characters in the entire game. Very important concept to learn, so you can develop yourself as a player much more going forward. Now, the next important concept that I gotta talk to you about, and this is called playing for the win condition. And all this has to do is understanding what needs to happen on the battlefield for you to actually win the team fight rather than just doing your job. For instance, if you have someone on your team like a Genji that is 5% to Blade, and you're an Ana, right? But maybe your main tank is dying and it's only the three of you up against 5 people in the enemy team. Now, that being said, you could try to heal your tank, but he's probably going to die anyways, but you could keep pumping him. But your Genji who's asking for heals on the right, and this is overtime in this hypothetical scenario, your Genji on the right is asking for heals. Yes, technically healing the tank is your job, but if your Genji dies, the odds of you winning that team fight turn to 0. Now, sure, that Genji has to pop off really hard for you to win that team fight, but it does give you a chance, because if that Genji gets 2 or 3 people, y'all might be able to stall, you get your respawns back, and yeah, you win that team fight. But if your Genji just dies, you're not going to have any sort of combo to convert with that Nano Blade, and you're not going to be able to win the team fight. So this is the important thing you need to understand. One is the win condition, and one is the place that, or the predominantly safe strategy. And in order to play towards the win condition, you can't care about people yelling at you. You can't care about your main tank getting mad that you're not healing him. You can't care of your DPS flaming you. Or if you're a DPS, you can't care about your healer flaming you, or your tank flaming you. You play for the win. You play in a way that will win you the game. Whether that means mercy pocketing your McCree, whether that means as a McCree, you go try to make a high noon play, whatever the case may be, you're playing for the win condition of the team fight. You're not playing to appease anybody. You're not playing to do just your job. You're playing towards the win condition. Another way to look at it would also be, let's say you're going at a spawn, right, in a scenario where the enemies are on point on a 2CP map and you're going to lose the point. Now, you could, hypothetically, come out as someone like Soldier, right? But the thing is, realistically, the only way you're going to win or take back this point that the enemy have complete point control of is by getting picks. You need a way to actually disrupt their sustain on point. And so there are a lot of characters that you could swap to that would have a great chance of doing that, and that might mean forgoing your ultimate. That might mean switching to an entirely different hero. But the Doomfists of the world, the Widows of the world, maybe even a Tracer of the world, and going really hard aggressive at one person and potentially getting that pick, that is the way that you actually play towards the win condition, and not just what is perceived like, oh, I'm gonna walk out, I'm gonna shoot people as Soldier, I'm gonna pop my own, I'm gonna die instantly because I can't burst anyone down. This is the important thing to understand, and this is something that you should really think about every single time you're dead. You need to be thinking about, what is the win condition here? Is there a character that I could swap to that has a possibility of turning this team fight? Swap to that character, maybe potentially stall by getting a couple picks, use spawn advantage to stall at the point, and then maybe you win a game you wouldn't have won. Now moving on to the 5th pro concept that you need to understand, and this one's going to be a little bit brutal. I already know I'm going to get roasted in the comments for this one, but this one's important. It is really important. If you want to improve, this is the most important thing to understand, and it's Smurfs and throwers do not keep you in your rank. Whoa. Before you click off, let me explain, because this is such an important mindset that you need to understand. Yes, Smurfs and throwers can be frustrating. Yes, it feels really frustrating to get farmed by someone on the enemy team that's smurfing, and yes, it feels frustrating to, lose a game when you have a throw on your team. But you got to understand that over the course of many games, it's a numbers game, right? It's a numbers game at its core. And what I mean by that is, yes, sometimes you're going to have that Smurf against you, but sometimes you're going to have it on your team. You might not know it, but realistically, if you play like 50 games and maybe like 5% of the time you have a Smurf, sometimes you're going to have the Smurf on your team, and sometimes you're going to have the Smurf against you. Now, it's the same way with throwers. Sometimes you're going to have the thrower on your team, and sometimes you're going to have the thrower on the enemy team. But you might not see this. You might not see the Smurf on your team. You might not see the throw on the enemy team. But there are going to be a percentage of wins and losses based on Smurfs and throwers no matter what, regardless of wins or losses. And I know that can be frustrating, but you got to understand that is not what you should focus on to climb. That does not matter. What matters are the games in between. Maybe 40% of the games are already won automatically, and maybe 40% of the games are already lost automatically. And I don't even think it's that much, but let's say hypothetically it is. That means there's 20% of games where your individual impact matters. Your individual impact matters towards the win and towards the loss. And if you win all those games, you're going to have a 60% win rate and you're going to climb. And if you lose all those games, you're going to have a 40% win rate and you're going to lose all your SR. So you need to understand this concept. And I said, it can be frustrating. Sometimes you got to take a break. Sometimes you got to do whatever you can to not tilt, because that's going to mess up your gameplay and you're going to basically throw your win rate. But at the end of the day, you should be focusing on what you can do and what you can control and not what you can't. There's nothing you can do about these Smurfs. There's nothing you can do about these throwers. But that does not mean that you can't improve as a player, and that does not mean that you can't climb. Now move on to the next big pro concept that is really, really important for you to understand. It's ults don't have to be perfect if they are just used to perpetuate momentum. That's a lot of words, that's a lot of complicated crap, but let me break it down for you really simply. So, everyone always waits for that perfect ult, right? That 5-man blade, that 3-man graviton, whatever the case may be, people love fat ults. It's great, it's awesome, it's highlight, all that stuff. The thing is, when you already have a pick, let's say you're going at a 2CP on the second point, you got that pick. You do not need your ultimate to be perfect. If you have an ult, You do not need it to be perfect. All you need to do is to keep that snowball going, to perpetuate that momentum. Because when you run into those remaining people, you got that pick, you run in, you don't want those people to trade out with you. You don't want those people to get an opportunity to ult back to you. You don't want them to have an opportunity to make a play or regroup or whatever they can do. You don't want that. You are basically pushing back one person, or they're slowly faltering. You don't want to give them a chance to regain their composure. And you don't prevent them from regaining their composure by getting the perfect ultimate. That's not going to line up for you. How you stop it is by piling on top of the momentum. That means one man ulting someone. That means you got to pick going with your blade. You got to pick going with your shatter. Solo shatter someone. You got to pick solo grab someone. Snowball the heck out of that. You're going to win so many fights because of it. Because if you can get that second kill with none of your teammates dying, with the enemy not being able to regroup, the enemy caught off guard, you can snowball that so easily and basically take that point with ease. And that is the number one reason why you lose points. How many times have you actually pushed a point, right? Maybe you got 1 or 2 ticks, but you ended up losing, and then you look and 3 of your teammates had ultimates, right? 3 of you. You might even had it yourself. If you would have just use and snowball. You can build up your ultimates again later, but in this moment, perpetuate that momentum, and it's going to win you so many games just off the back of that. Now move on to the last pro concept that you need to understand, and this is play with the team versus play away from the team. And this is a positioning concept that a lot of people just don't seem to understand. So, yes, there are times when you want to stack as 6 people and walk together, you know, like in a huddle, right? That's not always the case. The thing is, when you're played close together, yes, you're all with each other, but you also give the enemy a lot easier time setting up plays against you and your team. Let me give you the 2CP example that I keep giving over and over again, except this time I'll give you like Vizcaya Industries, right? You're playing on second point, right? And you are all on point. You are all standing on point. Now, yes, you're capturing the point faster, but the thing is, if the enemy come out and shatter you, or they come out and grab you, or they come out and make a play on you, y'all are all playing on point, and it's really easy to do so. Now, imagine that your Widowmaker's off the point, your McCree is on the high ground, your On is in the choke, and you have 2 people or 3 people on point, right? Yeah, yes, the enemy have to contest the people on the point, but they also are getting pressured from the people off the point, and the people on the point are getting sustained by the Honor that's off the point. So those people technically would have to push out past the point and contest those people off the point. But how can you do that if you have people putting pressure on the point and they have to contest? It basically puts them in a no-win scenario, but if you were all just stacked on the point, and a Doomfish just flies out and punches the Honor to the wall, uppercuts, kills another person because y'all are all stacked on the point, all of a sudden you threw a game based on your positioning alone. And that is something that is incredibly, incredibly important for you to understand. A lot of times, especially if you're effective from longer ranges, you don't need to be playing with your team to actually have the most impact in the team fight that they are participating in. That's all we got for you today. Thanks so much for coming by. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.